Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Protect Cloud Native Data. This event is part of the Masterclass Cloud series, specifically part 2, and presented in partnership with Rubrik. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational, and in fact, we have a Best Question prize to help encourage your questions. We know how tough it can be out there in the world of enterprise IT, especially around new cloud native architectures, and how data protection is more important today than ever before. So we want to help you to solve your challenges around today's topic, and we encourage your questions there in the questions box. We also have a number of resources available for download there in the handouts tab. I encourage you to check those out for additional information. At the end of the webinar, we'll announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. And as I mentioned, we also have our Best Question prize for another gift card, an Amazon $50 gift card. Prize winners will be selected and contacted after the event. And with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to today's two expert presenters from Rubrik. Welcome, Louie Ferreira, Global Go-to-Market Lead for Cloud Platforms, and Bill Gurling, Principal Architect. Thank you so much to our experts from Rubrik for joining us on the webinar today. And with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. Take it away.
All right, thank you guys for the time today. We're really excited to talk to you. My name is Louie Ferreira, and I lead Rubrik's go-to-market for our cloud platforms, which is our software that protects data in the cloud, whether it's in infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service constructs. And I work with Bill Gurling, who you'll hear from later in the demo. And what we do is we run around meeting with a lot of customers and partners and just evangelizing, Rubrik's cloud story. And the organization we sit within in Rubrik is called Rubrik X. And our team is really chartered with incubating and launching the SaaS products that Rubrik sells. So if you can imagine, we started off selling, modernizing backup and recovery in the core data center. And since we've launched that core platform, 6-7 years ago, we've iterated and now launched apps related to data security and then cloud and SaaS, which is where Bill and I play. So to take a look at the agenda and what we're going to go through today, we're going to cover these three things. So how enterprises can shed toil through consolidated data management. We're going to understand how to achieve resilience in the cloud, particularly in IaaS workloads. But if you think about cyber resiliency, ransomware protection, we're going to focus on that. And then really see how we can extend this beyond IaaS to platform as a service and other areas that Rubrik's innovating. So let's jump into it. So to do a quick level set on the platform before we go into the cloud offering, Rubrik offers a web scale software that is designed to protect data and really manage data regardless of where it lives, whether it's in an on-premises environment or if it's in the public cloud or any way between that. And you see in the middle of the screen this concept of zero trust. We've architected, the best of breed security platform in the industry, validated by many third-party analysts. And we just announced a really big strategic partnership with Microsoft, where we're going to go co-engineer solutions together with them to give customers zero trust data management in Azure. So this is core to everything we do. Some key tenets of the platform encompass, native immutability, which essentially means when you back data up to Rubrik, data cannot be altered or encrypted or affected by a ransomware event. So that's one kind of core thing in our platform, as well as automation in the API. So, with Rubrik, everything's built on a REST API, and we can orchestrate our software with any third-party tool out there, from Splunk to ServiceNow to vRealize and other cloud tools like Terraform and such that you might be using. And then these tools natively plug into the cloud. So we'll talk about this more in depth, but just know that regardless of where you're deploying Rubrik, you can always integrate it with the public cloud for things like long-term retention and spinning data up and workflows like that. And then really the platform is built for quick recoverability of data. So customers want to know that as they're backing up mission critical apps, that data can become instantly available. and that they can govern the data, present the data back, with a really quick RTO. And that is true whether you're recovering, across public cloud environments or in an on-premises world. And then on the top here, you see these three kind of circles around cyber resiliency, data automation, and cloud acceleration. So if you think about what we've done, we've built this core software platform that, again, is web scale. It's designed to run anywhere. It can run on delivered hardware appliances, or it can run as just pure software, in the cloud. We've taken this a step further and built in some AI and machine learning capabilities through how we index and manage metadata. And now we can give customers a lot of value beyond just the core data protection. So we introspect data and do things like ransomware remediation. So we can detect ransomware attacks and then help customers determine what the blast radius is, how widespread it is, what apps are impacted, and then roll back and recover. We're building tools and have launched tools around sensitive data discovery. So being able to identify things like, where does my PII data live, or HIPAA information? Can I run filters across my estate that identify that data? And then, automate some of those workflows. So these are all the things that really makes Rubrik unique, because beyond just backup, we offer additional intelligence and insights to the data. So that's our core platform in general. And then to dive a little bit further into cloud and what we offer there, there's really three main buckets of functionality that Rubrik offers out of the box. So maybe you've invested in Rubrik, and we've call it simplified and operationalize your core data centers, and we've eliminated all these components, and now you're running your backups on Rubrik. One thing you can do is securely and quickly push data to any of the large public cloud providers. We call this cloud out. So in a single policy, you would tell Rubrik, like, okay, I want to keep my information for 30 days as a local backup, and then I want to move the rest to, say, an AWS S3 bucket for long-term retention. So pushing the data to the cloud, data mobility, this is the first tier. The data is all still searchable. You can recover it. And most of our customers leverage Rubrik, again, to push data to the cloud and make it available there as needed for long-term retention. The next core bucket of what we do is the ability to instantiate data to the cloud or launch on cloud. So if we use, say, AWS as an example, we can take data and push it to an S3 bucket for long-term retention. And then we can actually take that data that's living dormant in an archive and instantiate it to live in the cloud and run as an AMI in an EC2 instance. And our software will handle that conversion from a VMDK to an AMI. So we can do things like disaster recovery workflows, have test dev. So I want to test the VM in the cloud and launch it there. I use Rubrik to do that. There's a lot of unique things we can do there. We do the same thing in Azure. So we can go VMDK to Azure Blob to spin up in a VHD. So some unique stuff. And what we're going to focus the rest of this discussion on is, how do you protect and govern the cloud native workloads? So when you're running infrastructure as a service in the cloud, platform as a service in the cloud, how do you tie into those workloads, orchestrate them, and simplify the data protection around it, while making workloads resilient to things like ransomware and cyber corruption and things along those lines? So those are kind of the three buckets we integrate with primarily. Now to go further into the third one and sort of what we have learned plays out here from a customer challenge standpoint. So we've met with hundreds of organizations just in the past 8 months around cloud, and many of Rubrik's customers, of our 4,000 customers, many of them are using the public cloud heavily. And what we've learned and observed is these are the three biggest challenges as it comes to data management in the cloud. The first thing is that people are really concerned with risk and impact of ransomware in the cloud due to the fragmentation that naturally happens. So when customers build out cloud environments, they build with the backdrop of well-architected framework, which results in them operating across many accounts and many regions in the cloud. And we'll show you how this plays out, but there's a fragmentation that occurs and inherently leads to a lack of control and lack of visibility. So for instance, how do I ensure I have a baseline backup as my cloud builders are building apps and launching apps in the cloud really fast? Like, how do I ensure that data is protected at a baseline level? How do I drive visibility to make sure everything's secure, right? So that's one challenge, is with fragmentation and that whole sprawl that kind of takes place, there's risk of cyber threat. The next thing is around recoverability of apps. So a lot of the cloud native tools out there, as well as a lot of competitive offerings, they can do that level one data protection, but when you talk about recovering the apps quickly, that's where these solutions fall apart. It's often, a 10-step process. You got to spin up servers and all these additional resources in the cloud to recover using the built-in tools. So that's become a challenge, and we've really built our solution around quick RTO. And then lastly is just the inherent confusion as to who's responsible to govern the data in the cloud. So in many of the customers we talk to, they have enterprise architecture teams, they have security teams, they have cloud teams. So it's like, who actually has to back the data up? Whose responsibility is that? Is it the infrastructure team that's always owned and governed backup? Is it the cloud architects that own these specific apps? Like, should they be backing the data up? Or is it the hyperscalers themselves? Because many of the providers offer built-in tools. So like, there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on, and we've made a solution that's really simple and allows you to just get that baseline backup. So those are some of the challenges. And then this is how we see it really play out from an architecture standpoint. So most customers that are looking, I'd say almost 100% of companies now are doing something with the public cloud. And of those companies, like 75% of them are multi-cloud, and they look to consume a wide breadth of services across all three major providers. The problem is it's really challenging when you're consuming a lot of these services to operationalize backup, because you end up with a bunch of point solutions and different management planes to control data. And this is how we see it kind of morph in the cloud. So whether it's AWS, Azure, or Google, if you're using the cloud native tools to back up, you basically set up and control these components in red at an individual account or subscription level. And they're all managed within those, again, panes of account subscription, geos. Most customers operate their accounts. First of all, they usually operate in like dozens or hundreds of accounts if they're of any, reasonable scale. So you'll have a situation where, you start off with a couple of accounts and say AWS, and then all of a sudden you have 12 accounts, and these accounts are in East region, West region, maybe a European region for redundancy. So you end up with this sprawl that quickly happens across multi-cloud, where it's like all these accounts, all these management points, no good way to fluidly gain visibility. And across multi-cloud, this could mean, 15 different tool sets, because every cloud has its own interface, its own, model. Then you mix that into the fact that most customers are hybrid. So they also have their on-premises environment to deal with. They have SaaS. And this is where I talk about in the beginning, there's a lack of control and visibility because of these sporadic tools and this fragmentation that takes place, right? It's really hard to understand, again, do I have a baseline backup across everything? Sure, some of the tools out there can aggregate some of this data. But when you talk about recovering and running reports, it's still a very manual process that's done on an individual, basis. So that's where Rubrik comes in. What we've built is a solution that, from a business standpoint, really addresses these three things. And we'll show you how it works in the demo. But the first thing is resiliency at the point of data in the cloud, or this concept of zero trust data management. So with Rubrik, we're all about, removing data from identity boundaries. So for instance, creating air gaps in the cloud by, say, taking snapshots from one AWS account and moving them to a different account altogether in the cloud, creating an air gap and then putting dual factor authentication on the second account. We could do things like backup Microsoft 365, users, and send the backups to a Rubrik managed environment that's outside of the customer's Azure tenant, right? So taking data out of identity boundaries and creating air gaps. So if you're hit with ransomware, the blast radius is much reduced. They can't get at the backup copy. The second piece is unification. So I talked in the beginning about how most customers we deal with are multi-cloud, and one of our core value propositions is delivering a single command center for customers to govern data, control data, report on it, and really unify policies. So within Rubrik, I can have a single protection policy that governs my AWS EC2 instances, Azure VMs, 365 users, on-premises VMs, like all in one tool. That's hugely powerful because from a governance standpoint, we drastically simplify things. So that's the second piece. And then lastly is this concept of baseline backup. So Rubrik has invented a policy-driven intelligence engine, or SLA domain as we call it, where you just set your RPO and RTO and you bucket an unlimited number of resources in it. And you can set this at a tenant or subscription level in the cloud. So as resources are being provisioned, you have the peace of mind to know that they're protected. So it minimizes, the impact of data loss from, say, accidental deletion, retention issues, ransomware, like you have that baseline backup. So those are the core business value propositions. And now we're gonna show you a demo of how the product works, and get more in depth to the architecture. So with that said, I'll flip it to Bill. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Bill, and today I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of cloud native protection on Rubrik Polaris. Let's jump right in. This is your landing page. This is the Polaris dashboard. When you first log in, this is kind of your heads-up display, an aggregation of all things the platform can do, given to you at a glance. Lots of stuff here, not in scope for our discussion today, but do know that you do get metrics in terms of what's protected, what's in compliance, what's out of compliance, as well as some of this higher level stuff that we can do with some of our ransomware detection and remediation workflows, as well as some of our data governance workflows. With that, let's jump right over to the remote settings area here, where we can look at what it might take to configure AWS native protection. You can see we've got a few accounts already added here. If I click this Add Cloud Account button, you'll see that I get a wizard-driven account subscription or project add approach to linking these things up to the Polaris platform for protection. I'm just going to show you Azure. Let's go with Azure for now. I'm going to show you Azure VM protection. Here you can see all we have to do is log into our Azure AD domain, our tenant, and what will happen when we click this Sign into Azure button is we will actually be OAuth'd into that tenant. We'll retrieve a list of subscriptions, and then you check the box on the subscriptions that you want to protect. Once you click Create after selecting the subscriptions, we will automatically build a service principal and grant it least privilege on the subscriptions you've chosen to protect. This OAuth user context is only used to link the subscriptions for protection initially. It is not used persistently for protection itself. And that pattern sort of holds true in GCE, slightly different in AWS, where we use CloudFormation to generate the service principals, but same sort of theme there where we take least privilege and everything is automated for you. Let's take a look at the SLA domains window here. So once we've added some accounts, we're going to want to go ahead and protect those workloads with one of these policies. These SLA domains, for those of you who are not familiar with them, can be multi-cloud, they can be hybrid cloud, they can, one policy can be applied to many different workloads, and they're very, very simple. So here I'm just going to define frequency and retention. I want a daily backup for 7 days. I can get more specific here if I want to, but I'm going to keep it simple for the purposes of this demo. I can also configure replication, and since I've dictated that I'm going to protect workloads in both clouds, I'm given parameters to replicate for both clouds. So here what I'm saying is if I protect an EC2 instance, I'm going to replicate those snapshots to this region. If I protect an Azure VM, I'm going to replicate those snapshots to this region. And then here I can choose how much data goes to the remote region. If I go all the way out to hit the duration of the SLA, I can dial down the retention in the source region, or I can just replicate a subset of the snapshots to the remote region. Once you've specified those parameters, give it a name, a description if you want, click Create, and we're good to go. I'm not creating this one because we've got plenty of those policies already in this environment. Let's jump into EC2 and look at protecting some workloads. The first boundary that we can assign these policies at is to the account. If I come to this account, click Manage Protection, choose my newly created policy, and then assign it, what will happen is all 32 of these instances that are not protected more granularly will inherit that policy assignment and will begin to get protected. Great way to do low watermark protection on an environment where folks might provision into it but not explicitly protect something. Similarly here, we can build tag rules, and these tag rules can actually map across accounts. So we can have a multi-account tag rule if we want. You simply specify the key and the value that you want to match on. So here, any VMs in these accounts with SKO tag of true will get this SKO policy. These tag rules periodically poll and will update based upon newly provisioned workloads or changes to the tags. So this will sort of auto protect you if you build this scheme in a logical way and always tag when you provision. The last level we can assign these policies at is directly to workloads that we might be protecting. So here you can see that I've got a direct assignment of this SLA policy to this instance. We can also do volumes. Another thing that we can do here, is we can filter based upon various parameters. So maybe I want to find only workloads that have file level recovery enabled. Here's one right here. Let's drill into it and see what our options are in terms of recovering. You can see I've got this policy assigned to this particular instance, more metadata about the instance here and here. You can see that I've got some options to exclude volumes from the instance level snapshots. I can take an on-demand snapshot and maybe do some maintenance and then delete it later. I can turn on and off file level recovery. Given that file level recovery is turned on, why don't we take a look at what we're able to do in terms of recovering files. Here we've got the option to search all recovery points for the file that we're after. We can select it, click next, select the recovery point that we want to recover, and we're given an option to recover here into S3, and we can recover into an existing bucket or a newly provisioned bucket with some randomized string. This is a great way to quickly fetch a file without having to dig through snapshots. And then your instances most likely have roles assigned to them. So those roles can just be granted privileges to fetch the files right out of these buckets directly over the AWS backplane. Let's drill down into the snapshots view here. Here you can see that we've got a number of scheduled snapshots created by the respective SLA. We've got a file level recovery that's specific to that recovery point where we can multi-select or search down into the individual recovery point and then execute that same file workflow. We've got the ability to restore in place. This is somewhat unique to us, regardless of whether or not you have replicated the snapshot and the source is gone, or maybe the source snapshot is still there in region. If the region is still intact, we can sort of execute this workflow where we will actually shut down the instance, pull the volumes out from under it, replace the volumes with the volumes from the recovery point, and then launch the instance back up. And like I was saying, if you've lost your snapshot in the source region, we will actually automatically copy the replica from the replica region and or account back over to recover it in place. Make sure it's encrypted with the right keys, and you can decide whether or not you want to put the tags back as well. The last recovery workflow that we've got here is the export workflow. This is pretty cool because it's essentially taking that recovery point, creating a new instance, but you can do it within or across accounts, and you can do it within or across regions. So we'll automatically handle all the copy operations and both snapshot copy and image copy operations that need to take place in order to get you stood up in whatever area of your infrastructure it is that you want to launch these instances. Obviously, you've got sort of standard instance launch parameters and naming convention stuff here. That pretty much covers recovery in EC2. You saw file level, in-place recovery, exports in and across regions and accounts. All that activity is logged here in this event log. You can see higher level stuff with specific tasks under it, and you can see all these filters here on the left-hand side. There's also a global event log up here that's very similar, but shows you all object types across all clouds, traditional infrastructure, virtualized workloads, physicals, etc. Jumping back into the inventory view, let's take a look at one of the other clouds real quick just to see what that user experience is like. The second and third cloud tend to be quite a bit quicker because I can just show you here that we can assign policies to the subscription level, to the resource group level, to the tag level. Resource groups being more commonly used in Azure, we decided to make that a management boundary, obviously in between these two in terms of inheritance. And then down here directly to individual objects as we saw before. If we jump into the object itself, you can see the same calendar view, same sort of metadata layout, same event stream, so nothing new here. You can see in Azure, we can actually do app consistency. So that's worth showing where we can turn on and off VSS, as well as enable and disable pre and post scripts that get executed around the snapshot. So if you're looking to maybe take a simple recovery mode database or an app that's easy to freeze and thaw, protect it within a VM level snapshot, we got you covered. GCE. Same deal, probably going to spend very little time on it here, but we've got a project level assignment. We've got label rules, which are a lot like their tag rules. And then we've got that same workflow where you can protect the VMs and the disks, where you get this amalgamated view that you can then filter and whatnot. And then same calendar view, metadata view, management experience, and event experience for GCE. Jumping into RDS, I do want to show you this real quick. We do have the ability here to execute point-in-time recovery operations. So you can see with RDS, you keep the same policy construct. In the SLA, you can dictate how long to keep the log backups. And we've got that point in time recovery using the logs, as well as this snapshot-based recovery. And if you go to recover, we've got the option to go in or across regions with RDS, as well as specify all the necessary launch parameters. There's only two more things that I like to show while showing off cloud native protection here. Number one is a compliance report that actually runs across your whole hybrid estate. So you can see here that I can actually filter this report based upon the source of protection. If I bring it down to the Polaris platform, you see RDS, EC2, GCP, Azure VM, all the things that we just walked through. If I bring in the appliance-based workloads, now you can see vSphere VMs, file sets, physicals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These reports can be time-bounded as you see fit. There's a number of ways to filter and prune them on the left. You can schedule them. You can call them through the API and grab CSV or JSON, pipe them into your tool of choice. Sky's kind of the limit. Additionally, we've got a pretty rich role-based access control. So I will just show you really quick how one might create a policy that allows you to maybe do read-only on a couple of very specific accounts and subscriptions. So let's say I want to do EC2, Azure Native. I want read-only. And I want no recovery targets. Actually, let's do one recovery target. Doesn't really matter because we're read-only. Let's do one recovery target here. The point is the granularity, not the policy. Let's do, both accounts in terms of source and all subs in terms of source. And so there you've got, a very quick example of a read-only RBAC policy that lets you interact with EC2, Azure Native protection, but only in the prescribed way. That pretty much covers it in terms of role-based access control. I appreciate you all taking time to look at the product and attend the webinar today. I hope the content was useful.
Great presentation, Louie and Bill. Really appreciate that demo. We do have some questions for you from the audience. Let's see here. First question that came in, they're asking, if we're going to be 90% on Azure in the next 6 months, what do we need to consider for how long we deploy protection for our DCs today?
Okay, that's a good question. Many of our customers are in a similar state where they're in the midst of a migration to the cloud. They're accelerating apps to the cloud. They don't know what their estate's going to look like in 6 or 12 months. The way that we've packaged our software allows customers to have a lot of licensing flexibility. So when you buy Rubrik, you're buying a bucket of software that you can then go deploy anywhere in any ratio through time. So, today you might be, again, 10% in the cloud and 90% on-prem. You would deploy Rubrik software to protect the workloads as such. And then as that data moves to the cloud, the Rubrik software follows the data. So we just essentially redeploy the software in the cloud, and you have investment protection because, again, we embed that flexibility with the licensing. We simply need to know where the source of the data is. So for what's on-prem, what do we have to back up there? We would size that in a delivered hyperconverged appliance, whether it's on, commodity hardware on like Cisco, UCS, HP, whatever server brand you want. And then from an Azure or AWS perspective or GCP perspective, we just need to understand how much data is there. We license it all, and then you can shift it, in between. And if everything that's on-prem goes to the cloud, you have the licensing to protect it as you go. So you don't have to repurchase software as you migrate to the cloud is the gist of it.
Excellent. I like that. That's a big, plus right there, that ability to migrate the software as you move. Next question, can the data stay within our AWS or Azure account?
Yeah, so the snapshots we take are immutable and they remain in your cloud account by default. And Rubrik doesn't move the data out of your account unless you tell us to. And there's instances you would do that. So in an SLA domain, you could say, hey, I want to replicate this subset of EC2 instances, say in AWS, to a different account or different organization, AWS altogether, to, again, create that virtual air gap or logical air gap in the cloud. But yeah, this is not backing up to like a Rubrik shared environment or tenant. This is fully owned by you guys, and we're orchestrating and managing the snapshots, and we're the engine for that.
Okay, yeah,
So
thanks for clarifying that. Let's see, another question here. I like this one. They're asking, we're on AWS today. How do you recommend saving on cloud costs? And is there anything that Rubrik offers to help with storage expenses?
yeah, we've actually built a lot of tools for that. So for AWS within our policy engine, there's a slider that allows you to set essentially an archive policy and then point it to the cloud storage that you want. So maybe you want to put data in like S3, then have it tear down to Glacier. You can do that. It's all automated. So what we try to do is really put the data at the lowest possible costing cloud storage based on the RTOs that you need. So we'll automatically begin to discover, once you set up, new cloud environments, and then just auto apply these policies that you already have in place in the new stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of flexibility with how you can, tier data and optimize costs. We have tools that we've just built in public cloud, for instance, where if you're backing up, cloud native workloads, you can, tier them down right upon backup. So even day one of the backups taken, it's automatically tiered to S3. We can also do that for long-term retention where you're taking, again, managed disk snapshots, and they're tiered off to something like blob storage after 30 days or 60 days. So a lot of flexibility, and we can definitely help with reducing the cloud consumption costs.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that ability to control the cloud costs. That's important. Let's see, it looks like we're running out of time here in our live Q&A. So I'm curious, Louie, for the folks out there who are interested in taking the next step, what do you recommend? What's a good way to get started with Rubrik?
Yeah, great question. So we have, we're a global company, and we have, sales teams everywhere, all through the US and every local metro. If you want to learn more, you can reach out to, sales@rubrik.com. And then that'll funnel you into our system, and we can set up a meeting with you to just understand more about your requirements and tell you a little bit more about Rubrik. But yeah, and then we often, locally in every region, we'll have events. We work with channel partners. You'll see stuff at Microsoft events and AWS events, where you can interact with us and learn more. So check out our website. There's, tons of information there, and even some trial softwares you can download and play around with to get used to Rubrik.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Louie and Bill. Great presentation, great demo. Thanks for being on the event today.
All right, thanks. Talk to you guys later.
And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the Amazon $300 gift card is Vrej and Barsoon from California. Congratulations to Vrej. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Bill and Louie for putting together a really informative presentation and for all their insights in the Q&A. I'd also like to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you for attending and for your questions. So that concludes today's event. Have a great day and a fabulous weekend.